Hi, you guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Fireside Chat with the Johnstons. I'm Danielle, and I am your host for this week's episode. If you are not familiar with Fireside Chat, normally my husband Justin and we do this together. Justin is working really hard right now with some gym owners who are hoping to achieve some really big goals in 2025. So I am on this week's episode alone, but you will see him next week. I hope you guys have had a fantastic holiday. We have been really enjoying ourselves throughout the last couple of days. I am filming this in advance and recording this in advance, so we have not yet had Christmas, but there's always lots of good news to have. So I will go ahead with good news again.
I am so excited.
Because that's how we like to start this. Because guys, even in the really tough weeks, you should have some good news out there. We did our pre-Christmas brunch with our staff. Our full-time staff always comes over and I make brunch for everybody. It was really fun this year. I feel like we were able to just kind of let loose and enjoy ourselves. And it happens before the workday, but in our last week before holiday break. And we just had a really nice time. I actually very much love my full-time staff. I love my part-time staff too, but our full-timers have been with us for a really long time now. If you guys have never read the Cheer Gym Owner's Handbook, I talk in there about how Lexi, who is, I would say, the newest to our full-time staff, was hired in January of 2020 to be our event director. So if you want to know how that panned out during the pandemic, go ahead and read the Cheer Gym Owner's Handbook, available on Amazon and Audible. Last week, I spoke to you about what it means to educate parents in the gym and why you have to have educated parents and why you need to make this a priority for yourselves in 2025. Educated parents make the world so much easier, the cheer world, that is. I used to believe years ago, and I think this was my own insecurity, that if there were parents out there who knew a ton about all-star cheerleading, then they might recognize my weaknesses. And they might know if I choreographed something in a routine that was illegal or I was teaching it in a way that was illegal. And honestly, it was my own insecurity, but it was a huge fear that I had. And it wasn't until I overcame that fear and just said, you know what, I am going to make sure I am always one step ahead. I always know more. It wasn't until then that I actually started putting a ton of emphasis on my own education and training my staff. I wanted to make sure that they always knew everything there was to know about cheerleading. And guys, these days, I can tell you because I coach a mini team and I have coached some of their parents before on our older open team that we had our first or second year. I can tell you a lot of the parents of these little ones today know cheerleading. They've done cheerleading. Now, they may have cheered way back in what some call the wild, wild west, when you could throw back handsprings and standing tucks in the same routine and get credit for it. So cheerleading was a lot different back then, when you could just sort of throw a tiny flyer around and you'd probably score well and win maybe. That was a different era of cheerleading than what we have today. But you're also getting some parents who did all-star cheerleading and have kept up with the sport over the years. And so as you see that happen, you are going to have to continue educating your parents to make sure that you are the most credible person in your gym. And you're going to have those parents who know about cheerleading. And it's so fun when you have somebody who knows about cheerleading and you can communicate with them on a different level, but you still know your sport. So not only in my gym do we have the daughter of the high school cheer coach, but we also have the daughter of the college cheer coach for the university in our town. And it's fun when I can connect with them about all-star cheerleading on a different level. One of them did all-star cheerleading, the other didn't, but they both know cheerleading well. But man, it is fun when you can actually have those kind of conversations. That said, I would be leaving out all the other parents in the gym who are around them if we just kind of had those one-on-one conversations and the parents in my gym didn't understand cheer. So it's my job to educate them because having educated parents gives you a really great culture and a good morale within the gym. So I am going to give you the strategies for what I use in my gym to make sure that our parents stay educated. And I implore you to look at these for 2025 because educating your parents is going to minimize a lot of drama. It's going to build that credibility and that authoritative figure that you want and you need in your gym as the gym owner. So first of all, education has to come at the beginning. You can't wait until somebody is already on an elite team. If you have a novice program and a prep program, you want these parents educated right from the beginning. A couple years ago, I was at our All-Star tryout meeting and I had a parent of a novice athlete say, well, I don't understand. What is the process? Like, does she go to level 2 next? Like, how does it work? And her daughter had a backbend. That was it, right? She was on a youth novice team, but it showed me that that parent didn't understand, okay, in my gym, you're going to be on probably a half year or a full year youth novice team for 1 to 2 years. If you did a half year season, I'm probably going to say, okay, if you have minimal tumbling, you probably need to stay on a novice team for a full year next season. After that, I want you to go to a prep team. You're going to stay on a prep team 1, 2, some kids stay on it 3 years because maybe they came into the prep team with very little tumbling in the first place. And you guys know, prep is not easy anymore, right? It was entry level 10, 12 years ago. It is not entry level anymore. And so if you don't have any tumbling and you are on a prep team, it's going to be very hard to move to an elite team. It's not abnormal in my gym that kids do a year or 2 of novice. They go into prep for 1 to 2, some for 3 years. And then by the time they're ready for elite, they're ready for level 2. That's not totally abnormal in my gym. But it showed me that this parent didn't know. And I think there were a lot of people in the room that didn't know what the process was. Like, how do I move from novice to prep to elite? How do I know when my child's ready? So, number 1, there's an onboarding process for all of your all-star parents. And we facilitate this process every year, regardless of if you're brand new or if you have been with us for 10 years. And I do have parents in my gym that have been with us. I think my longest all-star athlete outside of my own child right now, the longest active athlete has been with us for 10 years. And there's a couple of them that came in that year. Their parents know cheerleading. They know what to expect at competitions. But I still highly encourage them to attend these because just like you and I have to redo our knowledge every year of what cheerleading looks like on a score sheet and on the mat, these parents have to learn that too. Because if we look at what cheerleading required 10 years ago to win, it is very different than what it requires today. So we start this in a couple of different ways. The first one is when we're talking about educating parents on just kind of general gym policies and procedures. These were things I talked about in the last episode that is important. We have an athlete handbook. It took a lot of work to build. Next Gen does have a template for that. It's out there for our Academy members, and you can also purchase it on our website. However, this athlete handbook is super helpful because it outlines a lot of the policies in the gym. And I don't just mean like, hey, you have to pay by this date and don't be late for practice and stuff like that. It also outlines if you were to be injured for 8 weeks, here's what that looks like for you. We're going to re-choreograph your spot, and I cannot guarantee it back if you're injured and you're out for X number of weeks. If you're injured for 2 weeks, your spot is still there. We may have to get a fill-in for a competition, but you're not losing your spot if you're out for 2 weeks. And there's an infographic and there's like all this stuff that helps explain it because those are questions that parents have asked over the years that now there doesn't have to be this fear of like, she can't compete next weekend because she has a broken finger. She's going to lose her spot on that team, right? It clarifies it. We also have our All-Star 101. So I probably need to retitle this, to be honest, because it used to very much be 101. Now it's a little bit different. It talks about what are the practice expectations for your child, what are the expectations as a parent, what are the expectations of competition itself. Like, here's what it looks like. You need to be there for arrival time. We're going to gather at this time. This is what your parent information sheet is going to look like. You can expect the general schedule to come out 2 weeks in advance. You can expect the main schedule to come out 1 week in advance. If you were to go on to the event producer's website and you find the main schedule, but we have not provided it yet, there is a 99% chance that we know there is an error or we're trying to make accommodations for crossovers. So please do not go to that information sheet as the sheet, right? Like as the ultimate guide of what you need to do and when you need to be there. And also, it's super helpful if you don't share that because that is, in fact, not going to be the right information, most likely, since we already know. That All-Star 101 I would say every other year, I end All Star 101, I give about a 15-minute break, and then I host a score sheet meeting. And that essentially talks to parents about here's what you can expect to see on score sheets. If you see me at score check, here's what that means. A lot of times I might ask you for a video because I didn't video the routine. I can't take your phone and take it to score check, but I want to see it because I want to make sure I'm right before I go into score check. Here's what you might be seeing if, you see your athlete trip. Does that constitute as a fall of some kind or not? The answer to that has changed over the years. And so we have to almost teach parents and then go back and say, okay, actually that has changed now. Here's what it looks like. For a while, the competitions we were at, that score sheet didn't really account for a bobble, and now it kind of does. And so are you getting double jeopardized or double penalties when you have a fall because you're hitting it on execution, almost triple penalize your execution, your technique, your overall composition, that level of confidence that it literally says as a subcontext on that score sheet. And then you're also getting the deduction. So these are things that I go teach parents, and I don't do that every year, but I do it every couple of years because that score sheet changes. And I just want them to be accurate when another parent asks a question and they go to answer it. I also do score sheet meetings. I have trained our coaches, and now our coaches do them after every competition. But I do score sheet meetings. I sit with the athletes, even as young as our minis. Tinies, I would say we pretty much just meet with the parents and give them the lowdown. But with our minis and up, I meet with the athletes and I invite their parents over to be part of that conversation as well. I let them know here's how we scored. I have shared the scores. I've done literally a screen share before, and I've shared those scores so that they can see here's where we scored well. Here's what we need to work on in the upcoming weeks. Every February, we also do a coffee and conversation, and this is where we do focus groups with the parents. Though it is designed for parents to sit and give me their feedback, I leave the last 15 minutes for parents to ask questions. Through that feedback, I can usually see what gaps in education we have. Are parents misunderstanding something that I'm putting out there? Is it unclear what X practice is for? Or is it unclear when a coach says, that somebody is going to be taken out of a routine or whatnot? Those coffee and conversations help me see where are the gaps in the parent education. I also do benchmark meetings. I do those in about January, February every year. And those are where the athlete can sit with their parent and the coach for 5 to 10 minutes and just talk about their progress. Here's where you were at tryouts last year. Here's where you are mid-season. And here's where we'd like to see you be by tryouts this upcoming year. Doing it in January or February gives them enough time that it truly feels like mid-season where they have 4 or 5 months to work on skills prior to the new season. So if a kid has a back handspring and they're expecting to make a level 2, it's January or February, this coach can say, hey, I do agree you have a handspring. Unfortunately, you don't have a front walkover round off back handspring. You don't have a back handspring step out, a back walkover back handspring. And so if you were to make a level 2 team, you would need to have all of those things. This gives the athlete the opportunity for success. They can now sign up for the camps, the clinics, the open tumbling clinics that we offer, go to open gyms, sign up for private lessons. They can do all those things. A lot of times when we're giving those benchmarks and feedback in March or April, we're just not giving them enough time that they would maybe be able to get those skills by May. And then you as a coach are having to make that really tough decision. Do I think the athlete will have the skills in time for competition? And that's not really a position any coach wants to be in, nor does any athlete, and the parents feel pressure too. Our team reps, though they're not in an authoritative position, they're also in a really good position where we pick team reps for the most part who are pretty educated on the sport itself. And if maybe they aren't super educated, like their kids have come into this sport in the last couple of years, there are people who are great at asking questions and knowing when those questions need to get elevated up to a coach or the all-star director. And so the team reps can help with things like competition preparation. Are they going to accept cash or card at the door? Though that's on the information sheet, it's helpful for parents to have someone they can ask those questions to. They can also ask questions like, hey, she has her handspring. Do you think they'll put it in the routine now? And, my team reps would know the answer to that. They would say, well, maybe, but, they'll want to make sure it's super clean, that she's really confident in it, and that she's in the right position of choreography to be able to do that. We also use regular communication with parents. So we have a weekly email that goes out to them, and it has not only the information for that week, but all the previous information that hasn't happened yet. So though we're now on winter break, my weekly email that went out still had winter break on it. So even though that first went on there back in August, what are the dates that we're not going to be having team practices? I kept it on there all the way through now so that if you remember, man, when is winter break? We're going out of town and I don't know if I need to tell the coach she'll be missing practice. You don't have to go find and search for an old email. You can just look at the most recent email, and as long as it hasn't passed, like it's not in the past, it's still on the email. So those weekly emails are super helpful. I've been talking to a lot of gym owners lately who still rely quite a bit on Band or Facebook. And though parents may not always read emails, you can train your parents to read an email if it comes out every Thursday at noon. Like you can train them to do it. Our open rates on our emails are about 85%. I send them through an email marketing system so that I can see who has opened. And I looked at it a couple days ago out of curiosity, and those who didn't open were people that had given me multiple email addresses to make sure they get it, or like they gave me mom and dad's email and mom had opened and dad had not. And so we have really phenomenal open rates because we've trained parents. Everything you need to know is right there in the weekly email. Now, I'm not passive aggressive. When somebody says, hey, do you have the dates for choreography 2025? I'm not like, well, look at your weekly email. I'm like, oh, actually, that is in the weekly email. I'm not in front of my computer right now, but if you go back to last week's email, you'll find it in there. Also, communication with parents prior to a competition. It's not abnormal for me to do just a quick 3 to 5 minute meeting with parents prior to a competition. Make sure they don't have any questions. They all understand. Doesn't it feel great when you can have that little nod that yes, you will be at competition because you showed up to my meeting and competition is this week, right? Make sure when you're communicating things with parents that you are doing it in a visual way. So if you think about how most people and their learning style is, most of us are not sitting around reading books and books and books. I like books. I can appreciate a book, but I don't know that that's necessarily my learning style. And if you look at society and the way kids are learning today, some of my high schoolers don't even have textbooks because they're learning through things like online class platforms and video and visuals and stuff like that. So when you guys are doing this information for your parents, make sure that it's not just, you can use a Word doc. A Word doc is better than nothing, right? But as you look toward each new year and you're looking at how can I improve and be better at things that I wasn't as good at last year, start to consider moving things over to Canva, make it more visual, create infographics. One of the graphics for how to get parents ready for competition day that we use is literally a picture of a backpack, and it's got a line and it says bobby pins, and it's got a line and it says water bottle, and it's, these different things so that it's more visual for parents. I could easily give them a checklist out of the notes section on my phone or out of a Google Doc, and all of that's fine. We're still presenting the information, but people are visual, right? And so remember how you learn and how most people learn is going to be almost taking a snapshot in your brain of how something works. So once you guys make this effort, and to be honest, it's going to be a goal that can't be, I want to be better at communicating and educating our parents this year. That is not specific enough. It's not measurable. You can't guarantee the outcome is going to impact your culture in a positive way unless you have something tangible that you can measure, right? Maybe you're measuring at the beginning of the year, you're looking at, how much do parents actually know? Do they understand anything on scoring? Do they know how we do team placements? Do they know this and that? And you're comparing it year over year. That would be one measurable way that you could do it. I know for me on tasks that are really hard to measure, when I'm looking at, okay, I want to improve the culture in our gym this year, or I want to improve the education for our parents this year, what I look at is I say, okay, if I do these 10 tasks in 2025, that will be my very best effort at guaranteeing that my parents are more educated than they were in 2024, right? And I list out those tasks and what is measurable. Then it's are those tasks completed? By June, do I have 50% of the tasks or 75 or 100% of the tasks completed? So there's like this element of setting your goal, deciding what is going to make me say at the end of 2025, okay, this was a successful goal. Doesn't mean it's not going to continue being your goal year over year. If you've never really invested into parent education when it comes to All-Star, that might be your goal several years in a row. And that's okay, because you have to develop that education within the culture in your gym if you're wanting to prevent things like parent drama, unrealistic expectations, the pressure that they're putting on their own athletes that isn't a positive pressure. So the benefits that you're going to find for parents, you're going to find that they are way more confident in you and your coaching staff. They're confident in the gym and its abilities to grow athletes. Maybe you're not winning every competition. Like my teams, I had 10 teams at a competition last weekend. Not every team won. And so it's okay that we didn't win, but my parents understand that we know what it takes to win. I can't control if I have 5 sick kids in the weeks leading up to competition. I can control what I do when I have all of those athletes out on a mat. Your parents are going to be able to look at this and say, this is a credible program, and I feel confident in their ability to develop my child as an athlete. You're going to find that you have better support from parents in helping with that growth mindset, right? I did see, again, this is an educational moment. And we're always going to be in this process of educating parents, but a parent who has been in our program just a couple of years, and her daughter did, for the first time ever, try to back handspring by herself last night. She had a coach nearby. It went okay. But she said, I told my daughter, if you just practice this, you'll get it by the end of January. And for me, that's going to become a teachable moment, because the first thing I'm going to say is, hey, we don't necessarily want to give her that deadline of the end of January to get that back handspring. It's cool if we want to take a video now and she does. The goal should be, I want her to complete X number of reps by then. I want her to complete X number of handstands, handstand holds, handstand walks, shoulder dips, like these different things that maybe would likely lead to that outcome. But we don't want to put the pressure of the outcome into the goal, right? Because she can't control, like her mind, that kid wants that back handspring. It doesn't mean she can control her own body's strength and flexibility. So what we can do as coaches is troubleshoot that, and we can give her the tools and the homework to get her there. Now, this is a great teachable moment for that parent, because now I can sit down and say, so we can't control the outcome, but we can control all of the things she does to get to the outcome if she wants it badly enough. Here's a homework sheet that I gave her. By the end of this month, she should be stronger. You should see less bending in the arms. You should see less of her head throwing back if she's doing this drill. She would lengthen her handspring, and she's more likely to get the skill in a shorter period of time if she's doing these things. So let's measure these things rather than giving her a deadline. For the athletes, you're going to find that when the parent and the coach are on the same team, metaphorically, you're going to get a whole lot more encouragement for the coaches themselves. You're going to get a lot more support of the things the coaches are asking to do. You're going to get the parents who are holding their kids more accountable because they trust that you know what you're talking about and that you know what you're doing as a coach. And that, again, that you know what it takes to build championship teams, or teams that go in saying, we got a shot at this. When parents can support the coaches, it is the best possible outcome for athletes. But you have to educate the parents on these things so that they're kind of like, I want my parents to be team twisters and, like team coach Angie and coach Cassidy and coach Danielle. I want them to be on that team, and I want them to be supportive of the coaches. And that means they have to be educated enough to know, is this coach doing a good job or a bad job? A coach can spend 2 hours working on pyramid. In my mind as an owner, is that a good practice? Not really. Like, that pyramid might be the most important thing, but those kids might walk away feeling really frustrated and defeated. It's not the only part of the routine. There's definitely other parts that you might be losing more points on. Gosh, if your jumps didn't score well, you could be losing more points on jumps than you ever did on pyramid. I want my parents to walk away knowing we know our score sheet. We have reviewed the scores. We've gone over them with you. I've showed you how far off were we and where do we have the most potential points to gain. And that's what we're going to focus on. That said, I'm not going to ignore the other parts of the routine because we've got room to grow in every area. And if we can pull up dance by a 0.1 by getting our motions sharper and more in sync, then that's a point one that we can easily take. You're going to find that your athletes get more support from their parents in the game plan, the overall plan, that athlete that I told you about, that like, here's the homework plan for her because we can't control the outcome, but we can control the things we do to get to that outcome. You're going to find that parents are better holding their children accountable for those things. Instead of, here's what it's going to take to get your body in the right position where it could potentially have that skill. You're going to get parents who understand that it's more of a process rather than saying, well, why don't you have that skill? If you're not level 3 next year, we're moving gyms. Or if you're not level 3 next year, you're done with cheer. Or if you don't have your back handspring by tryouts, you're not trying out next year. And guys, like, I've had parents in my gym in the years prior to that education and my communication with them, I have had parents say all of those things to their kids. And honestly, it's detrimental to like the mental state of an athlete to feel like it's an outcome-based sport. And it is, but it's also an individual goals and growth mindset mentality that is going to get those kids to their goals. As far as the gym, when you have education like this, you're going to find that you have so much more credibility and a better reputation. A couple people have commented on some of my posts before that like the wins are what bring new athletes. And I think that can happen from time to time. I think it creates a whole other set of problems, but ultimately it's going to be your reputation. And if what your reputation speaks to is valued by the community, then it's going to lend to the credibility and you're ultimately going to get more athletes and you're going to keep your current athletes longer. If my community values the family-friendly aspect of it, of, hey, listen, I understand it's Friday night football. We're not going to do our extra practices on Friday nights because we understand you go out to cheer, your brother is playing football, your mom and dad are out there cheering on the football team from the stands. Like, if those are the values in my community, then I adhere to them and I educate the parents that that's why we do those things. You're going to find that those who do not match the values of the remainder of the community will probably move on over time. And those who do will become really great staple parents in your gym and people that are continuously referring others to you over time. You're going to find that you have less conflict and less drama with parents because there's less to have conflict over. You are the expert in cheerleading. You are the expert in your community, in your gym, on what it takes to be successful at All-Star Cheerleading. And the more you teach parents, the more they recognize you and put you in that position. Now, you have to live up to it. You have to get your training. You have to continue training. You have to stay doing things like listening to podcasts like this and, going to conferences. And it's not just about the skills. You have to run a business that matches what you're trying to put out on the competition floor, because there are a lot of gyms out there that can put out a really great routine, but they are a total mess behind the scenes. And eventually those things flow through onto the mat, whether it's drama in the warm-up room or drama with the parents at the competition or disorganization and people are showing up late or coaches aren't showing up on time or they're showing up smelling like alcohol. There's a variety of things, but it's all going to show up on the mat at one point if the back end of your operations is not running successfully. Lastly, you're going to find that you have improved athlete retention because parents are happier, right? Parents are not encouraging their kids like, if she didn't cheer next year, that would be totally okay with me. You're not finding that as frequently because parents are understanding how much work their kids are putting into this. No kid got a back handspring by luck, right? Even YouTube kids that learned it off of YouTube, they spent some time teaching themselves. They spent some time researching it and watching the videos. No skill is coming 100% by luck. And it's definitely not getting perfected enough to put out onto a competition floor by luck. So you're going to find that you have improved athlete retention because the athletes are seeing the path. They believe and they trust that the coaches can get them to that path because we've educated them on how they're going to get there and what goals we're going to be able to measure specifically. And then you're going to just have happier parents. Imagine how it feels when that parent has helped their child, mark off, yes, you did your workouts today. Yes, you did your handstand dips. Yes, you did your handstand walks. You did your wall sits. You did all these things. We checked it off. And now we go to the next private lesson And man, does your handspring look so much better. You're getting that buy-in from parents because now they're educated in what it takes and you're the one who's taught them. All right, guys, thank you for joining me. I've been in this position where I've had some really tough parents over the years. One comes to mind in particular. They're on year 10 of being in our gym. She was kind of tough the first couple of years. And I also look back and I recognize all of the things that we could have done so much better at. And one of those was transparency and education. There were a lot of misconceptions. There was one parent who had judged All-Star 1,000 years before, who was giving people a whole bunch of information, and she was becoming the resident expert at, what it took to make successful teams. To be quite honest, she was also kind of a mean girl. And so it wasn't the culture in our gym, but it turned this one parent into believing that was how you get from point A to point B, and that was how our gym should be getting from point A to point B. And why did that happen? Because I wasn't the one being transparent enough, and I wasn't the one educating the parents. So when you're not educating the parents, you're essentially leaving that to somebody else. Now, where can you get some good information for your parents, and where can you get that information to be able to educate them? I've got a couple of good resources for you. First, make sure that you head over to the Let's Talk Cheer podcast available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Jason does a great podcast, and it is with the intention of helping coaches and helping parents better understand All-Star. He does a really good job of speaking to parents. His co-host is actually a parent herself. And so there are a lot of times, in fact, last week I sent his episode about high school tryouts to a parent in our gym who was kind of frustrated during the high school tryout process. And she said, I really hope she makes varsity next year, but I don't know what the high school is looking for. And I said, I understand it's totally different than what All-Star is looking for. And we had this conversation. And then how cool was it that I could send her this podcast and say, hey, listen in at, 8 minutes. He starts talking about high school tryouts and what you can expect and like what it is behind the scenes. Great podcast. So it's a great one, guys. It requires you to put some effort in, or your coaches to listen to it. I have coaches who listen to it, and it's great when they can say, oh, that was a good episode. We should share that with the parents, right? So you don't have to be the only one looking for this education. Secondly, one of our Next Gen Academy members actually wrote this book, and it was before he was in the academy, so I found out about it afterwards. But Stephen Cohen from Flyers Athletics, and it looks like Cody Boyd, who I think is a dad in his gym, wrote this book, and it is a book for dads. It's the Cheer Dad Survival Guide. Well, one day Justin was in a meeting and it was running late, and so I wanted to just wait for him, and I sat here in his office and I picked up this book and started reading it, and I think I had the whole thing read in 45 minutes. His meeting went forever. I had the whole thing read in 45 minutes, and I was like, this is a great book for parents. Like, is it forever going to be in date? Maybe not, because score sheets change and processes change in All-Star Cheer, but like, what a good introduction into cheerleading, not just for dads, but for all parents. So guys, I hope you got a ton of great information on how to better educate your parents and the benefits of educating your parents. I look forward to seeing you guys in the new year on the next episode of Fireside Chat with the Johnstons.